Hi. It is noon on Wednesday Pacific time, and so that must mean that it's Writing Wednesday. This is Janet Fitch, your host, guide, mentor, uh, partner in crime, uh, here to talk about fiction writing. And I'm here to answer your questions. So feel free to put questions in the comments, and I'll be happy to answer them. I have, it's been a hairy couple of weeks. So I've skipped Writing Wednesday. One was Inauguration Day, and one was the assault on the Capitol. So there's been a lot going on. And I just taught a weekend intensive on the sentence, the art of the sentence, which is the art of the art form, is what you do on the sentence level, because a reader reads a story, but they also are reading, all they are reading is the sentence that's in front of them. So it was a big deal for me as a not so young writer to get the memo that you also had to write the sentence as well as the story. And I spent kind of a second apprenticeship just learning how to craft sentences. So we had a big weekend where we looked at some of the great stylists, because not every writer is a stylist, but every writer takes, good writer takes care that their sentences are clear and beautiful. And some people have a pronounced style, and we were looking at how that's created on the sentence level. And we had a lot of fun breaking sentences open, recombining them. The most important thing is learning to pick strong verbs. The only thing that moves in a sentence, the only action you can get out of a sentence is the verb. So to try to have precise and lively verbs. Don't be satisfied with the one-size-fits-all verb: was, looked, had, get, went, that, all those. Everybody writes that way. First draft, everybody writes that way. So don't worry about trying to create your story and fix everything at the same time. You can't turn the bathwater on and off at the same time. So first let it run, do whatever you're going to do, but don't let it out of the house looking like that. Get some clothes on, don't go to the store and put pajamas. So really, the verb, the most important thing. Also the use of a dependent clause, and use especially the introductory clause, which you put up at the front of the sentence, gives the reader a sense that he or she is in good hands, that the writer actually knows what the sentence is going to be about and is so confident that they can put part of it up front as he was folding his socks. He imagined the meeting with Ginny, whatever. So it means you know that he's folding, what he's doing while he's thinking of Ginny. So putting it up front varies the structure of the sentence. And as we've talked about many times in fiction writing, or any kind of prose writing, even if you're writing memos at the office, variety is good. So if you tend to write a long sentence, make sure you pepper in some short ones. You change the grammatical structure of you don't keep writing the same sentence over and over grammatically and by length. You shift them around. You introduce dependent clauses where you rhythmically feel that they help, and where you feel meaning, they help the meaning. Hi, all you guys. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. There's some of the viewers were in my sentence workshop. So thank you for joining us. Yes, happy days are here again. Maybe. um, so one of the things that I suggested, I've suggested in the past, is that everybody should have a good thesaurus with the finger tabs, the Roget's International Thesaurus in some version, a dictionary on your desk or near your desk, so that if you're adding a word that you don't, if you like words, if you're one of those people who likes, kind of a you like words for their own sake, and you'll use new words that you really haven't, you don't use in daily life. Make sure you have a dictionary as well as a thesaurus, because in the search for the right word for the right spot, there might be a word that you like, but it might not mean exactly what you think it does. So make sure to check the dictionary if you're picking a word that you normally wouldn't use in daily life, to make sure it means what you think it means. Like, for example, the word penultimate. You see people use the word penultimate. Penultimate means the next to the last thing. And people use it as a synonym for ultimate. So if it's not a word that you would use normally, just check and make sure that you're getting the right version of the synonym. If you are looking for a synonym in the thesaurus, it's just, you're looking for that right word that really rings the bell. Sometimes you have it on the tip of your tongue, and when you look at the words in the thesaurus, it's like, oh yeah, that's what I've been looking for. But sometimes when you're vocabulary building, you'll see a word that you think it means X, and it does, but it doesn't mean quite the X that you wanted. And if you use it, your reader will stumble. It's like, that's not really what it means. So always check with the dictionary. And we talked about it in our weekend. We talked about everybody should have a good grammar book. And people don't teach grammar. People don't want to take grammar. In junior high, it was like, who cares about this? It just went, and they don't even teach it anymore. So that's another level. And why should they? The average person listens and hears and knows how to basically construct a sentence. But you're writers. Okay, suddenly grammar does matter. And not only matters, but it's sort of interesting, because when you start looking at these stylists, great prose stylists. We looked at Styron and Didion and Toni Morrison, Lee Young Lee, Les Plesko, Poe, Chandler, Jean Toomer, Kane. What a great book. When you start looking at their sentences, it's really interesting in a way it wouldn't be interesting to, a ninth grader, that a good grammar book has sentence diagramming. And sentence diagramming is super interesting for a writer. It's like, how the hell did Styron put that sentence together? And then if you have a grammar book that has sentence diagramming, you can give it a try and see how that's put together. And I wasn't an English major, so I kind of make a hash of it, but I'm not getting a grade on it. It's just my own curiosity. A good grammar book will save your life. I mean, I have trouble with that and which. And I often have to remind myself how you use each one. In my well-used grammar book, it doesn't even have a cover anymore, called English Composition. It's a Barnes & Noble college outline series from 1961, because grammar doesn't change that much. You can buy an old grammar book, and it's perfectly useful. If you can't find this used, ABE Books, all the used bookstores in the country put their books up there. If you can't find the Barnes & Noble, authored by Vivian and Jackson are the authors, people seem to like this, a new one called Warwick's or Warnick's, and there are a couple of editions available in that, and that has the sentence diagramming. So that seems to be a useful one. I like this one a lot. Um, and I don't use it all. I use just little pieces of it. But when I want it, it's on the shelf. And when I'm exploring sentences, it's really, really important. So somebody wrote to me. This is my. Somebody wrote to me about. We did live crit of paragraphs from the participants, which I think is a kind of a high wire act, but. It was interesting to work with work that hadn't been polished to the ends of the rainbow and published, right? You're looking at breathing, living tissue. And somebody asked who I didn't get to this participant's paragraph, and they contacted me to see whether I would do their. Was this one a thesaurus or a dictionary? No, this is a grammar book called English Composition. You need a thesaurus, a big one with the finger tabs, a dictionary, usable, a collegiate dictionary, and a good grammar book. So the Warnick's is a grammar that looks pretty good. This is an old English composition book. So they'll all be called English Composition is what you're looking for. What I noticed with the paragraph that I worked with offline, this person was very interested to know what the difficulties with their paragraph would have been if I had talked about it. And it was 3 things: verb choice, was, became, had, have, got. It was needs to know, which means you don't need to give people a treatise about something that you put in. Think about whether you really need it. The reader only needs the information they need to understand the scene and this place in the scene. So you don't need a treatise about, what AA is, say. It's like, just figure they're going to pick it up. Readers are smart, and they pick things up. And the other thing, in general, is it needed compression. And you can learn compression by beginning to read your stuff out loud. Read some poetry out loud. Listen to the rhythms. And then read your thing out loud. And you'll see that you can cut usually a ton of little phrases. There was, there is, things like that. Everybody, the verbs see, watch, look, were so visual. I taught a whole class in writing from the senses. And, notice that you don't need a protagonist, a point of view protagonist, to say, and I saw blah, blah, blah. Because if they're describing it to us, we know they saw it. Then you just cut it. So look for things that you can compress and get the water out of the sponge, get that loose material into a more vivid, flavorful context. And reading out loud, you can also tell what's kind of bland and oatmeal in your mouth and what has some crunch to it. So I have a question. Let's see if I have any questions here before I move into one that was sent to me. Oh, Deborah Cross got her new Roget's with the finger tabs. You'll use it the rest of your life. And Linda's break job ate her stimulus check. Yeah, it comes and goes. There'll be other ones. Here's a question from Romnick on would, could, etc. What is the tense of the sentence calling for those words? I don't like what they call the conditional tense, because the reader sees vividly things that are actually happening, could have done something, doesn't give you an image. So it's important for the writer to commit to something existing and being. In general, fiction writers we're kind of peasants in a way. It's like we want the substantive thing. Abstractions don't give you a clear picture and aren't as strong as something like a conditional tense. Hey, Jeffrey. Hi, Gloria. Good to see you. Hi, Toby. Let's see what else we can talk about here. Brenda wrote to me, and you can always write to me and through my website if you have questions, like after we're done. If you have questions you want me to talk about next time, I'm happy to talk to you about them. Cool. And her question is more on scene and story. And I'm talking to a community of writers right now about maybe doing a scene and story. So it's the opposite end of the writing spectrum from the art of the sentence. This is, how do you tell a story? So Brenda asks, because she's working on a manuscript, would love to hear your thoughts on how to recognize discrete scenes and chapters when you're writing. So, do you simply write your scene and divide up later? If so, how do you know what constitutes a scene and what constitutes a chapter? That's a really good question. And discrete, ETE, means separate. And discrete, EET, is like being judicious. So ETE. How do you recognize discrete scenes and chapters where you're writing? Hi, Sylvia. It's with scene, it's very easy. There is what you call unity, the Aristotelian unities. Aristotle, 2,000 plus years ago, wrote a book called, I don't know if he even wrote it, he just something he taught and somebody else wrote it down, probably. But it's called Aristotle's Poetics, and you don't have to read it. I'm telling you the best thing about it. The best thing about it is what is a scene? Because back then they didn't have prose writing, they had playwriting. And Aristotle said that a scene was unity of time and place. One time, one place, one scene. So if you have characters in outside the principal's office talking about whether they're going to get expelled or not, and the principal calls them in, you've just changed your scene. So your scene ends in the hallway. And what has to happen is unity of time and place. And something has to happen in a scene where the characters can't go back to the way it was before. So something happens in the hallway outside the principal's office that changes things for those characters. Maybe you don't need going into the principal's office. Maybe it's all going to be in the hallway, or smoking behind the hospital, or I don't always like over the table, two people sitting talking over a dinner table. I think that's the most boring kind of scene. You're much better off having them doing something, or having at least one person doing something, and then they can talk. Walking somewhere in these liminal spaces, like outside the principal's office, or hanging out in front of the high school, or walking somewhere, walking down an alley. You know how kids are good at liminal spaces because they don't own the primary spaces, so they use all the wasteland. And those are better spots for your scenes than two people sitting, eating, blah, 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 for fiction that it's not as good. It's not as interesting. But anyway, how do you know when you're done with a scene? Is something has happened that you can't go back to the way it was before. One time, one place. So you're in that setting, something happens, and that's it. Because let me tell you, when you are teaching, if you ever teach creative writing, which you will someday maybe, a lot of student work is they go to a party, they hang out, and then they go to another party, and then they hang out, and then they go to another party. And they never have a scene. Nothing ever happens. They just go to another party. And so when you write like that, then it's hard to have a discrete, like, where does that scene end and the next one begin? Because you didn't do anything in the first scene. Nothing happened, so it's not really a scene. And then you move to the next one. That's not really a scene. You move to the next one. So there's a lot of moving around and no scenes at all. So if you think about always setting a scene somewhere and knowing that something has to happen, and I say that, how do you know you have a scene? How do you know that something's happened? Is that the character comes in one mood and leaves in another. Something has happened. Character comes in pissed off, ready to tell the boss off, and then is confronted by, some pilferage that they thought nobody was going to notice. So they leave, shattered, discovered, humiliated. So something has happened in that scene. And try not to leave writing is hard. Oh, did I say that? Writing is hard. And so the writer is always trying to leave the scene. We're always trying to have to answer the phone, or, I've got to go pick up Johnny. The character does not have to pick up Johnny. You, as the writer, want to get out of the scene because it makes you anxious. It's hard work and we want to bolt. And it's just like having those conversations with your spouse or significant other, that there's one person who's always trying to leave. You have to stay for the whole show in a scene. So you don't, there's something that I call entrances and exits problem, which is people who spend so much time getting into a scene that they don't have any juice left for the scene. So try to use a little bit of exposition, just narrative writing to get you in and settled to the scene. And then the dialogue starts when there's the conflict, the real scene begins. And then once the changes happen, then get out of there. You don't have to show us leaving either. So a lot of fiction is, especially dialogue, it's about conflict between characters, conflict between the self and the world too. So don't waste a lot of time getting into the scene. Use narrative to get you to the point where there's conflict. And then get out once you've accomplished what you want to accomplish. Cut. You might go on and on because it's hard to stop, but know that that's what you're going to have to cut. Then you'll have a break, and then the next scene. And it's like, you don't have to have like you say you have an argument with your brother, and then you're at work somebody's dumping their project on you, your character. You don't have to explain too much. You don't have to get up in the next morning and make your coffee and get in the car and drive to work. People have seen enough movies that they've seen it. You've got a big conflict scene with a brother. Cut. The next scene, you're walking into work. We understand it's the next day or 2 days or 3 days. We don't really care. We just understand that was that was last night or the night before, and now we're dressed for work and we're going into work. We don't have to see you go to bed and get up and take a shower and brush her teeth and have a Pop-Tart and feed the cat. And so often the writer needs to do that because we don't really understand how the character got from the brother to the office, but cut it once you write it. Once it's served its purpose, it doesn't belong in the book. The reader doesn't need it. That was just something you needed. So you cut all that intermediate material. There's no reason for it. Now, so there's the opening and closing of scene. Chapter is more about what kind of a rhythm do you want your book to have? Everybody has their own. If you've read a lot, you have your own preferences for how you like chapters to go. There are books that have no chapters. Readers hate those books because everybody wants to know, how far to the end of the chapter, am I going to read tonight? And if there's it's hard to find things. If you want to look back and find something, it's hard to find it if there's no chapters. But many books, especially short books, will just skip the chaptering altogether. If you decide to have chapters, then that's going to be your structure. That's going to be like the heartbeat, like a big heartbeat of the book, is the expectation of the length of the chapters. And some people have chapters of wildly different length. Some people have a chapter that's pretty much the same length, Some people like short chapters. I have kind of a rule of thumb for myself, which this is not necessarily your rule, but I have a rule for myself: the longer the book, the shorter the chapters, because the reader wants to feel that they're moving through. I learned that from Tolstoy. If you look at his big books, War and Peace and Anna Karenina, the chapters are very short. So it's a big book, but you're getting through it. It rewards the reader constantly. Also, in the 19th century, people didn't watch TV. Somebody read a chapter of a book or two, while everybody else, sewed or, whittled. And so the short chapters were like little episodes of the show, So there are times that you don't want to watch a feature film. You just want to watch a half-hour movie, half-hour TV show. So think about that. So you think about length, how long, how consistent. Do you want the length of chapters to be? My chapters tend to be roughly the same length. And then you'll see how many scenes also it's like what scenes go together. So that I title my chapters, so I know what goes in there. And when the sort of the topic is changed, if I have a chapter at, let's see, a chapter of being in line at the bread queue in Petrograd during the revolution, I'll have one or two or three, even if there's an incident in the first scene that leads to the second scene, and then something happens that leads to the third scene. Those scenes will all fit in a single chapter. It's just like a file in a filing cabinet, what goes in that file? Do you want a new file, a new file folder every time you have a scene? Could. Or you could group them and say every scene about that bread queue and what happened that day would be in one file. And then I'm ready to move you forward in time to a different topic altogether. Say a conflict between, Marina and her best friend, the Bolshevik. You know, there might be a group of scenes getting to the friend's house and then meeting her mother, the Countess, the Bolshevik's mother, you know, who in this terrible neighborhood, and then her thoughts on the tram on the way home. Those three would fit in one chapter. Some people work have more than one voice. You know, I'm thinking of King Solver's Poisonwood Bible, which is a tour de force. And King Solver, each character gets their chapter, and then when we move to another voice, we'll move to it'll be a new chapter. So so that's what constitutes a scene, and then a chapter is much more the writer's taste. For how they want to group things. You know, some people just want to put everything that happens in 1917 is going to be in one file folder, and everything that's going to happen in 18 will be in a different file folder. So the file folders might be bigger. And there are books that only have. There are novels that only have 5 chapters, but usually. Often somebody who has 5 chapters might not chapter them. They might call it section 1, section 2, section 3. So a section would be a group of chapters. Then when you're ready to move on to often a new time, an era in somebody's life, or then that would be a section. I didn't have sections in my first 2 books. They were short. But the Russian books have sections because she lives different lives. I mean, basically, she lives different lives. And so when she moves from one life to the next, then that would be a section break. The reader loves those breaks. It gives them something to hang on to. They know where they are in the book. They know. I like giving old-fashioned titles to my books. You know, so the Russian book. Let's see. The Revolution of Marina M. has the chapters are things like. Okay, let's see. Do not awaken my memories. Until you read it, you don't know why it's called that. But once you read it, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. And then when you're looking for it, you'll find it right away. The section breaks are usually time, era, and place. I think very geographically. So if something is happening in Petrograd in 1918, I can find it. So I use chapter titles that are usually what I use as a chapter title as a file in my computer. So I can find a scene and know what was in it. And some people just chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and that's all they want to do. It leaves it more mysterious. I always like to title my chapters because I can find them. Because I don't want to get lost. I don't want to get lost. So what else can I tell you about these the chapter question? But I think the reader really appreciates the ability to cling to a chapter title, a chapter break. Then you have books like we talk about stylists. You can do style in chaptering. There's a book called The Autumn of the Patriarch by Garcia Marquez. And there is no punctuation. It is all one paragraph. It is all one sentence. It is all rhythm. And we talked about that a lot in the sentence class, that rhythm, people don't think about the rhythm of prose. They think about the rhythm of poetry. But a rhythm is an organizing feature. That's we can remember poems and why they seem to hang together. A really good writing has a music to it, and it definitely has a rhythm to it. And you can clean your sentence up, you can clean your writing up considerably by reading poetry out loud that has a sound to it, that has a beat. I use Dylan Thomas because he's so obvious, but there are a lot of people who are very aloud poets. You know, the Amanda Gorman, who recited at the inaugural, that was rhythm, alliteration, and assonance inside the sentence that knit those things together. But rhythm, especially in spoken word poetry, really held that together. So watch her performance and listen to that. Listen to Fiona Apple has a new album called Hand Me the Bolt Cutters, or something like that, about bolt cutters. And there's a song on there called Newspaper. And listen to that and imagine reading that as prose. And you can hear the beat. You can hear how she works the rhythm. Then when you're editing your own prose, you can hear when there's extra verbiage that you don't really need and clogs up the rhythm. You can pull that stuff out, and it tightens the prose, and it makes it more musical. You can see, oh, I need an extra line here, an extra word here, an extra syllable, like a one-syllable word. So it makes the music, da-da-da-da. You know, I'm missing that. It goes da-da-da-da-da. You know, I'm ruining my own rhythm. So that's a very helpful thing to do. All right, what can I help you? Steve DeGroot says, I've many short chapters in the second half of my book of 3 or 4 pages, and wondering if I should combine some of them. Yeah, think about where the larger breaks are. So if your chapters are 3 or 4 pages long, and that, say it's a battle scene, before the battle, during the battle, and after the battle, and you've made separate chapters, think that they might all belong in one file folder, and just put a double space break between them and stay in the chapter, and then that chapter can be the Battle of St. Augustine, or whatever it might be. Okay, Brenda asks, is there a best place to end a scene to encourage readers to keep going? Should we end for rising tension or cliffhanger? Fetch the bolt cutters. Thank you very much. It is beautiful. And you listen to that and imagine that she's singing prose. Fiona Apple's new album, Newspaper, is a really good song to listen to. So is there a best place to end a scene? I like to end a scene when it's completed, but I believe in punching out a chapter, punching out a scene, which means, for those who haven't worked with me before, it means the strongest place in a sentence is the end of the sentence, so don't let it trail on. The strongest place in a scene is the end of the scene. So once something, you have a really strong thought, don't add things after it. If there are things that you need to say, put them higher up, and end always with the strongest thought, the strongest phrase, the strongest, emotional place. Then there's the cliffhanger. Okay, so I believe in variety above all. You want to vary everything so that nothing becomes, oh, there's that trick again. Cliffhangers are great, which just means you end a scene in the middle of the scene, and then you move into the next chapter, and it gets people moving. Dickens, a marvel for that. But Tolstoy does it. in Anna Karenina, if you're going to use a cliffhanger which the next scene could continue, or it could go somewhere else and come back. You can do it either way. But don't overdo it. It's a one-trick pony. You don't want to do it too much. It's very irritating if you use it more than like a couple of times. It just becomes a shtick. So generally end, not for rising tension, but you've finished your scene. Your boyfriend that you thought was going to propose to you dumps you. And he gets up from the table, and there you are. End of scene. So it's not end for rising tension. It's ending for that you've just ended the scene. But don't go on after he's left and notice a friend at the next table. Let it stand. And then cliffhangers they're good, but if you overuse them, they're awful. So very pick and choose. Don't, in a book you want maybe, 2. What else can I tell you? Can you divide a novel into both chapters and sections and title only the sections? Sure. You can do that. You can do whatever you want. I like to do both, but it depends on how many chapters. The longer the book, the more people appreciate something to hold on to. So I have titled my chapters and also my sections. Like here's part 6 of The Revolution of Marina M. So The Bright Foxes is the section title, and then the date is really important, and often it'll be place and date, but this one moves around. So and then the first chapter will also have title. But yeah, you can do that. The sectioning and chaptering is stylistically notable. So it'll be part of the reader's experience of the book. So I like a chapter title, but that's just, But yes, you can. You can divide both chapters and sections and title only the sections. Absolutely. Fetch the bolt cutters. Awesome. Okay, Romnick, it was good to see you. So Max asks, how do you decide which scenes are essential? If I have some major tensions, how do I get between them if they are too far apart in time? Well, they should be the essential scenes. Think of them as fence posts. You don't put all your fence posts right up against each other. So spacing them is a good thing. And it's will be part of the rhythm. The big, upsetting, the most dramatic scenes will generally be interspersed by quieter scenes. So I don't think getting too far apart is a problem. I think the opposite is more of a problem. When they're too close together, you're not allowing them to breathe. What else can I say? How do you decide which scenes are essential? Well, not every scene has to, cut bait. Not every scene has to be a pillar. Some scenes are doorways, some scenes are windows, some scenes are other things besides pillars. When after a first draft you'll have an idea of the essential scenes, but that doesn't mean you cut everything that's not essential. Sometimes that you need that quiet scene of walking along a river and remembering something from childhood, as well as the big scene in the massacre at Znamensky Square when the Cossacks fire on the crowd. Not every scene is going to be that. It's not a movie. It doesn't have to move like a movie. It has to move like a novel. So you have much more leeway to do all kinds of scenes, and you should, because then the reader has a more varied experience and is not tired of those big. Does everybody have to be screaming in every scene? No. What else can I tell you about this? Yeah, chaptering is really it's a real it's something you're doing for the reader. It's like climbing, like setting pitons, if you do any rock climbing or, cliff climbing, and you set pitons for somebody who's climbing behind you to grab onto. It's nice. It's a generous thing to do. And some people want the reader to struggle a bit. There's some, if you can imagine it, there are some writers who write a complex book, complex ideas, a complex style, very intellectual people who want to see the reader struggle a little bit. It's like they're struggling mightily, and the reader needs to meet them part way. And you lose a lot of people that way. They don't want to do the work. But other reader, perhaps that's not the reader you want. Perhaps you want the reader who is willing to do the puzzle that you're laying out. It's not fun if they're not willing to follow the breadcrumbs or not willing to do, to solve the riddle, to keep going. These are challenging works, but who's to say we don't need all of them? We need challenging work as well as unchallenging work, and less challenging, more challenging. You have to figure out, where you want to pitch it. Here's Victor. A word about pacing. Is that a matter of more calm scenes to break up conflict? What is pacing? Oh, what a good question. Pacing. This is like the heart, the rhythm of storytelling. How much do you tell? How much do you make the reader wait? Imagine the first storytellers. You're around the campfire, and the guy is narrating the story of the hunt. And then I raised my mighty spear. And then what? And I looked the beast in the eye. And then what? That's pacing, okay? Rather than saying, yeah, I followed it and I saw it and I killed it and there you go. Oh, So the pacing is often a matter of unspooling your reel little by little, and reeling. How do you keep the reader on the hook? When do you reel in? When do you let them go? I think pacing, for me, I kind of work musically. I work by ear, as I think you're starting to get. So I think of it in terms of like a symphony or opera, that you want the rise and fall. You're looking for, think of it as a ride. Think of your book as a ride that you're taking somebody on, and the bar comes down and you start ratcheting up the first hill. So without that, if it's just whirling, 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 it's not as interesting a ride as if you allow things to slow down and you take in the teetering rocks or whatever, and then it comes around a corner. And so pacing is measuring out the rhythm of the reader's experience. So for me, I'm a very emotional person, so I'm looking for the pacing of the emotional experience. So people can't always be terrified or always be in the grips of of, some terrible, agonizing sorrow. They can only stay there that long, and they'll close your book after a while. So how much can they take? And then where do you have to let them breathe out as well as breathing in. So for me, that's kind of how I think about pacing. And then I also have people read the manuscript towards the end of the process. Even not writers, but just regular people who are willing to do this. And I say, tell me where you put it down to go to sleep, or where you put it down for a sandwich, or if you're bored, write in the margin, boring, don't worry about my feelings, just write it. And then you see where you've lost your fish. And you might want to even, if those are your more calm moments, if you've lost your fish, if they're not if they still have to want to know what happens next, even if it's not a super stressful scene. So there's a difference between easing up on them, a calmer scene, and losing them because it's dull. So it's always useful to use people that way if they're willing to be guinea pigs like that. And usually there's somebody who is. They have to be honest enough to tell you when it's boring or when they put it down. Okay. Anything else we can talk about? Brenda, are you good? Did you get your question answered? Alrighty. Well, we're doing pretty well on time, and I will see you next week for Writing Wednesday. I also want to say that there's a fiction first aid this Saturday, so they're doing Saturday instead of Friday this month through the communityofwriters.org. It's 15-minute one-on-one consults with an experienced writer teacher. So I'll be doing it. Victoria Patterson, who's a wonderful writer, and God, I can see her face. I'm losing my Rachel Howard is the third. And it's amazing how much you can get done. I am thinking about, Brenda says, are you thinking about a weekend intensive on character? Might. I think scene and story. I think people are ready for the opposite of the art of the sentence, which is getting into the storytelling aspect of things. But yeah, I could do a weekend on character and point of view. That would be an interesting thing. I'd like to do one on dialogue. There are all kinds of things. That it's a nice format because it just gives you a massive injection, and then you can unpack stuff for a couple of months. I always like that format myself. So thank you very much for joining me. And we'll be here next week. So if you want to send me something on my website, which is janetfitchwrites.com, send me questions and I'll organize Writing Wednesday for you. Okay, take it easy. Bye.